Center. She's been in the ministry a long time. She started in, 1987, doing, children, youth ministry, Christian Ed at Christ Church, and she's now at First Church in Ogden. She's one of the leaders in the annual conference, the head of our conference board of pensions and health benefits, which is a big full-time job, and so we appreciate the work she does for us. So let's welcome Kim as she talks about adoption.
All right. Welcome. Thanks for coming. This is a topic that's quite close to my life, so messed up. It's risky business talking about something this personal, so hopefully we'll do all right. Okay. This is my family. Steve is my husband. We've been married now for 33 and a half years or something like that. And in 2005, we went to the country of Colombia to adopt our sibling children. Angie had just turned 8, and Oscar was 6 3/4 years at that time. They're cute, aren't they? I want you to see that they're really cute kids. The picture they sent us, the adoption agency sent us, that we had to decide on really, really fast, had both of them looking so sad. I wasn't sure if they knew how to smile. And so when we went to Colombia, and Steve and I were in the room, and the door opened, and the foster mother brought the 2 children into the room, and they smiled, it was a big relief to me that they could, in fact, smile. I wasn't sure. They looked so very sad in their picture. Okay, I'm talking about adoption as a mission of grace. Grace is a key word here. I'll tell you why. Adoption is a mission of grace, number one, because as an adoptive parent, you have grace-filled hopes and possibilities. Grace-filled hopes and possibilities. You have the hope of having a family. Now, this was not exactly true for me, but for many adoptive parents, the reason for their, at least one of the major reasons why they choose to adopt is because they're infertile, they're not able to have children, or not able to have as many children as they'd like to, and adoption gives them a graceful second opportunity in life to have children. I'll explain my rationales a little bit more. The adoption agencies talk a lot about the grace-filled hope of having a forever family. Many children who are in hard times get into a foster situation where they may be with a family for a month, 2 months, maybe 2 years, maybe even 5 years or 7 years. But then eventually they age out of the foster system and they may not have a family as a young adult. The idea of adoption is that you would have a forever family, that the children would always have parents and the parents would always have children. That's a grace-filled hope and possibility. For me, a grace-filled hope and possibility was very much that I would have a family of faith. Because I'm a person of faith, I was hoping so much that I would be able to share that faith with my children. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. And I wanted to love children. You know, when you're a pastor and you don't have kids, and you see the little kids running around, and you see little kids in the church who need help and need care, you can't really take them home and have them bake cookies with you. You can't really take those kids home and have them sit on your lap and read a story to them. It's hard to minister to kids in that way. But if they're your own children, legitimately, then you can nurture them in those very precious and rather intimate ways that only a parent can do. And I wanted to be able to do that. The Bible has many mandates in the Old and the New Testament to care for the widow and the orphan. I wanted to do that. It's part of my faith. When I served the church in Yuma, Colorado, there was a nearby church in Nebraska that I heard about that they were so concerned about their rural town diminishing. They were afraid that they didn't have enough children to keep their school going, And so the people of this town came up with a plan that they would be foster parents and adopt children into their families so that they could populate the school, so they could keep the school going, and it also helped their church. And I thought, that's a way to do mission. Evangelism is to get kids into your church, in our churches that have so few children. I wanted to try to see if I could, if you have kids, then you can build kids around kids, right? That was part. It wasn't that I wanted to just use them, don't get me wrong. But I thought, as a person of faith, as a clergy person of faith, if I had children that I could raise in faith, I would be able to reach more other people with the faith. I also was mindful of the descriptions in the Bible of how God saves us by adopting us as children. There's in a sense, a biblical call to adoption. In the letter to the Ephesians, chapter 3, the writer says, I have become a servant of God's gift of grace. That servant of grace was talking about breaking down barriers between Jews and Gentiles. And as a person of faith, I have felt called to break down barriers between those who have and those who have not. Americans and people of the other parts of the world. And therefore, I felt called as a person of faith to adoption. I also wanted a family that would make the world be a better place in every possible way. When I was in 9th grade, I had a science teacher that taught us about overpopulation of the world. And in 9th grade, in 1974, I started thinking about adopting children. I went into my marriage telling my husband we were going to adopt children. It just took us a very long time to get enough money and enough stability and enough security in a church to be able to do that. But I knew that this was my mission. I had a passion I had a little bit of education in Spanish. I had at one time in my life wanted to be a Spanish exchange student to South America. And I didn't tell you, but in 2000 and 2001, I went on short-term missions to Nicaragua. And in 2002 and 2004, I went on short-term missions to Guatemala. And in 2005, I felt like I went on a mission trip that has become a 10-year lifelong mission. I had this hope and dream, grace-filled hope and dream, that my children, who are Spanish speakers from a different Spanish culture, would be able to come into the United States and become bilingual and bicultural, and in so doing that they would be able to be agents of making the world be a better place themselves. I had, with all of my intelligence and all of my education and my husband's also, I thought, sure, we would raise these children to be PhD, international peace diplomats. I had hopes. And if not that, maybe they could be bilingual United Methodist ministers to reach the Hispanic people that we all long to reach, right? These were my hopes to make the world a better place. Grace. We have a pro-adoption culture in the United States. It started back in the days of orphan trains. You may know that orphan trains also did some bad things by putting kids into slave labor conditions. But it was an attempt, in the best understanding of it, to place children out of orphanages into homes, into places where people could love them and raise them well. During the social gospel time of the turn of the 1900s, there was an understanding, there was a move in the social gospel to think that nature didn't control everything, that nurture had a much more strong role in making the world be a better place. And so adoption became more popular. Do you know the development of baby formula was one of the biggest things that made a difference in adoption policies and practices in our country? because if you didn't have a mother to nurse a baby, it would probably just die. But with the advent of good, nutritious baby formula in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, better yet, more babies were able to survive. More children were able to be adopted. But what really got things going with an international adoption is World War II and the Korean War and the Vietnamese War. Guess what some of our soldiers were doing? They were procreating in other parts of the world. And some of those biracial children were not well accepted in their own countries. And so our country then became called upon to bring some of those children back here to the United States. It became part of our culture to do so. Also, in the pro-culture lineup was the increasing amount of children going into foster care in the 1960s and the war on poverty, 1970s, 80s, more and more children in foster care, thus more older children that were available for adoption in the United States also. Guess what else was going on, though, in like the 1990s? There was this big battle between Democrat Bill Clinton as president and the Republican Congress. Do you remember, what was it called? I already forgot. There was this big Republican push, and they got into Congress. Contract for America, or whatever it was. Anyway, during the 1990s, there was this big debate about abortion laws, as we still are debating, but there was so much about the family and family law that was going on in the 1990s, and they wanted to figure out a way that Republicans and Democrats, pro-life and pro-choice people could get along with each other. And so they came up with more pro-adoption policies. The Hague Convention was passed in 1993, which was an international treaty that made it possible to adopt from foreign countries. In 2000, the Child Citizenship Act was passed, and that made it possible for a person like me to go to a foreign country, adopt a child, and bring that child into the United States, and instantly they're an American citizen. Can you imagine what a child from El Salvador or Guatemala would give today to be able to become an instant citizen of our country without adoption as a policy? Adoption is a very great gift. It's a graceful thing. Also, we have a pro-adoption tax policy. I don't know if you know this. Those of us who have adopted know it. Adoption is extremely expensive, especially international adoption. Domestic adoption isn't so much. But we have a tax policy that favors adoption, so that in 1997, a person who adopted a child, an international child, could get $5,000 tax credit. And in 2002, that went up to $10,000 tax credit. And it has increased each year by a few $100s. In 2005, the year of our adoption, the tax credit allowed us to have a $20,000 tax credit because we adopted 2 children. Grace. We have grace-filled hopes and possibilities. This is a picture of my husband's brother, his wife, and their daughter that they adopted from China. Jade has done very well. She's a little weird, kind of quirky kid, but she's in college now, and she's doing fine. And they've had a happy adoption experience. There are families that have really great experiences. The grace-filled hopes and possibilities come true many times. It is possible. Unfortunately, it wasn't really our story. Therefore, I tell you that a mission of grace, adoption is a mission of grace because you, the parent, need grace. You need grace as an adoptive parent, and I'm going to tell you why. Here's my family again in 2007. Don't we look happy? You know what? There's so many pictures that don't get taken because there's fighting and tears and horrible things happening. The pictures don't tell the whole story. Family trauma. Immediately we knew we were in trouble. We spent a month in Colombia and we came home. I took family leave from the church. I was serving the church, Wesley United Methodist in Pueblo, and I took family leave. That was a very gracious opportunity. One of our retired clergy colleagues filled my responsibilities for 3 months while I was gone. It was blessed. But that meant I was home with these wild children for 3 months while my husband went to work every day, and I thought I was going to die. I truly did. I thought somebody was going to die. It might be them. It might be me. Somebody was going to go to jail. Somebody was going to die. It was horrible. I mean, one time the kids found my husband's gun, and they came at me like this. And I didn't know if they'd also found the bullets that go with it, because I didn't even know it existed. And really, truly, there was trauma. Trauma. I lost weight. I hardly got any sleep. I was exhausted. There was physical violence. There was emotional distress. There was a sense of danger, danger, danger. I didn't know that I, the good Christian woman that I was capable of such horrid thoughts about children. I didn't know how dark it could be. I didn't know how evil I was until I had those children who were pushing every button, being in every way so difficult and being a threat to my sense of well-being. It scared me. It made me see how much of a sinner I was in need of God's grace. So not only were my children not going to be PhD diplomats for international peace, they couldn't even get along with each other. They couldn't get along with my husband and me. They couldn't get along with the neighbor kids or the school kids. And legal problems started piling up after the school problems, eventually dropping out of school. Not only were they not going to become that Hispanic United Methodist pastor who was going to save the day for United Methodism, but they couldn't sit still in Sunday school. They couldn't gain benefit from confirmation class. They couldn't understand or appreciate worship, and soon were dropouts from church as well. Financial duress. When your kids have to go to counseling all the time. When your kids end up in institutions that are really, really expensive. You soon forget the $20,000 tax credit that helped pay for the adoption. And now you're into it deep. Deep. Disruption. Stuck that way down there because we didn't do this. But I started reading. You know, we're in such straits. I started reading more and more and more about other people's adoptions. And I started finding out that a lot of adoptions don't survive. It's like marriage till death do we part that ends in divorce. The forever family gets disrupted. How does this happen? Do you remember this story in 2010? The mother who returned her 7-year-old son to Russia. Everybody thought she was a monster. I could totally get it. I totally could understand what she had done. Even if not sent back to Russia. In fiscal year 2013-14, there were 79 cases of disruptions in the United States involving 91 children from foreign countries who entered state custody. Department of Social Services in the United States. Who pays for that? Society pays for it. You all in your taxes pay for it. And the Department of Social Services has the parents' number. We are paying for it still, paying and paying for it. Not because we were disrupted legally in our case, we didn't do that, but because my daughter started running away from home. She disrupted the adoption, and soon my son is running away too. Okay. So, even if not disrupted all the way back to Russia, there's ongoing pain in the family. There's serious need for grace for the parents who got in way over their heads. Who went in, the book we had to read said, eyes wide open. We thought they were until we found out later. So where is the grace for adoptive parents? Well, for one thing, our United Methodist Insurance has United Behavioral Health Employee Assistance Program. You get 8 free sessions every year if you have a new thing going on. And if you have to pay, you only have to pay $15. Do you know that has stayed $15 all the time I have used it? All these 10 years I have used mental health care constantly. It has only been $15, whether you're going to a flunky counselor or whether you're going to a psychiatrist. It's $15, people. This is good information to know. Where is the grace for adoptive parents? Teachers, social workers. There's good people out there who try to help. Sometimes they don't quite get the seriousness. They think that, oh, well, if you just did this, it would be all better. But they learn eventually. They figure it out. It's serious, and they can be allies to help you maintain your sanity. Supportive churches. I told you about the situation where I got maternity leave for 3 months because a retired pastor took care of things for me. I had this lady who took the kids every Tuesday night so I could do church meetings on Tuesday nights. She'd take them to her house, she'd feed them supper, she'd help them with any homework that they might have and be willing to do. She made sure they got their baths and got into their pajamas, and then my husband picked them up. And when he got off of work. Supportive churches. Wesley was amazing. And Ogden First Church has been amazing too. People care. They understand it's not just a personal mission, it's a church mission. Clergy colleagues. There are a lot of us who have adopted. I was hoping more could be here tonight. Many of our adoptive colleagues aren't able to be here tonight, but there are many of us, and many of us have had these kind of struggles, and it's been phenomenal to have the support of people like Chris Richardson, Sandy Spar. I've known of Jeff's struggles. It's hard stuff, and it's helpful to know that there are other people going through it with you. Where is the grace? God, prayer, Scripture, theology of grace. I lump these all together because they all just go together. Psalm 102, hear my prayer, O Lord, let my cry come to you. In the day of my distress, you will rise up and have compassion. Have to trust in that. Ephesians 2:8, for by grace are you saved through faith, and this is not your own doing. As hard as it is, as hard as you try to do, if you can't, it's not about you, it's about God. Thanks, God. Okay, so it's a mission of grace because you have grace-filled hopes and possibilities. It's a mission of grace because you will need grace as an adoptive parent. And it's a mission of grace because you will need to rely on grace for your adopted children. Another picture. Royal Gorge. Family Day. You know what Family Day is? Family Day or Adoption Day. It's the day you celebrate your adoption. Ours was May 10th. Really close to Mother's Day. We always tried to do something special. Maybe not on May 10th, but on the Saturday closest to May 10th. And it was always hell. the kids just made it hell. It was horrible. Angie was fighting us the whole day, and if you could see her eyes closely, you can tell she was probably crying. And it was just horrible. We tried to do fun things, and it was just hard. Because the kids, we need grace for our adopted children because they have wounds that don't heal. They've experienced violence, sexual abuse, attachment disorder, or reactive attachment disorder as it's technically known. They have wounds that won't heal of abandonment, malnutrition, fetal alcohol and drugs, genetics that are terrible. They have PTSD, chronic anxiety, and chronic depression. They need grace because of all these terrible things. They have brains that have been formed in the worst kind of circumstances. And they're operating from the brain stem, which is survival. They're operating in survival mode. This is my experience. Not all kids, as I said in the beginning, not all kids that are adopted are in this kind of trauma, but my kids were, and a lot of adopted kids are operating in that way. My kids, they can't think logically. They're thinking all the time in the state of stress. They have limited IQ. My kids do, not all adopted kids. And so they have extreme trouble learning from their mistakes. They have extreme trouble learning anything. School is horrifically difficult and very unpleasant, therefore to be avoided at all costs. Ever hear of Erik Erikson? Psychosocial development. Trust versus mistrust happens between birth and 18 months. What happens to a child when their mother is unavailable because she's on drugs or who knows what is going on? They learn nobody's dependable. Nobody is reliable. I can't survive in this world by expecting good people to take care of me. All I can do is mistrust the good people. The only people, ironically, that they're willing to trust are the people who are on the streets. You will need to rely on grace for your adopted children because they then, as a result of that horrible soup they're born into, make terrible choices. Self-harm. And she cut herself all over the place. Oscar's now got piercings in quite a few spots. School dropout, runaway, homeless, drugs, gangs, guns. I'm not just talking about the fun picture or the time when they came at me with a gun in the first month of our adoption. Oscar, just this past month, at age 17, was running around the streets of Ogden carrying a gun, he told me. Prostitution. Angie, my beautiful daughter, has been a prostitute. 2 different times she's lived with guys who were over 35 years old while she was run away for months at a time. Our children need grace. Beautiful children. You look at them and you think, surely they could understand what they're doing. Surely they could choose better. Surely they could understand the consequences of what they're doing to themselves. How could we have rescued them from such horrors of their life, and then they do it exactly the same things to themselves? How? Is it a choice? Is it a choice? This has made me think quite a lot about the theological issues of free will versus predestination. I never studied Calvinist theology in seminary, but I always thought it was pretty stupid. But now, with the experience of my children, I have to say, do people have a choice? Or is it just a matter of operating out of the program that you were given? Oscar was gone for 2 months this summer doing meth, staying with some guy who was sexually abusing a 12-year-old, carrying a gun, acting as a gang thug. And he told me just last week, I'm choosing to be the person I was born to be. Now, is that a choice? Or is that predestination? It's a theological question, psychological too. I just put it out there for you because I don't have the answer. So where is the grace for these adoptees? Love and patience, lots of counseling, if they'll go, if they'll receive the benefit of it. My kids went to lots of sessions where they didn't get much good out of it because they weren't willing. Special education classes for emotionally disturbed children. Social services has helped us tremendously in our case. Ironically, Angie accused Oscar of sexually abusing her, and that's how we got the attention of social services. It was really traumatic and horrible at the time, but because social services intervened, we were able to have her placed in a safe place when she was 12 and when she was 14 for a while, till she ran away from there. Where is the grace for the adoptees? Realistic expectations, not unrealistic ones. These kids can't be normal. They can't make the decisions and choices. Church-supported resources. When Angie was living on the streets in Denver, I was really grateful for United Methodist Ministry of handing out peanut butter sandwiches in the park and the gathering place where she went to get baby supplies for her baby that she was expecting in February, and Denver Urban Ministries, and other churches I don't even know about that are out there that are feeding the homeless and the hungry in spite of their bad choices. Whereas the grace, brain research that's getting better all the time. Birth control, thank God for birth control that comes in a shot that lasts for 3 years, because your kids might choose next week not to do birth control, so if you can get it in there right away while they're compliant. And for my kids, I'm hoping that someday they'll be able to apply and get accepted into Social Security disability. I'm hoping that our social system will have the strength to take them in, because they really can't function very well in society. Where is the grace for the adoptees? In God, the orphan finds mercy. That's where I have to leave it.